is Christopher John Bjerknes. I am with Richard Willett. This is another installment in our Kabbalah drama series. Today we're going to be discussing the major shift and the new dynamic in the geopolitical alliances in the world and how they relate to the war of Gog and Magog and Leviathan and Behemoth and East and West.
This is something that's really important right now. I mean, it's always been important for 2,500 years, but it's been important. It's important far more now because we've seen this massive shift from the US abandoning Ukraine and going over to support Russia and these whole and also distance themselves from the UK, from Europe. And it's something, these big moves are happening, and then people in the UK. I'm not seeing how isolated we're getting over here. I've been saying it to Gaz that the Europeans, UK, us, Edom, as these guys would call us, the Edomites, are getting incredibly isolated here, away from anything else. And I think it's incredibly important to bring this out. Just take us through what has happened here. Why has Trump suddenly aligned himself with Russia when they've had nukes pointing at each other for decades now?
Both Trump and Putin are members of the apocalyptic messianic cult Chabad Lubavitch, and they have always been working behind the scenes to manipulate East and West, America and Russia. A big aspect of the whole Cold War was that the threat of the Russians enabled Israel to posture as if it were an ally of the United States and receive American military aid against the Middle Eastern Muslim nations, which were artificially aligned with the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union supplied substandard munitions and armaments and weapons to the Middle Eastern Muslim nations. They gathered all the intelligence on them and fed that to Israel. And Israel would feed the Soviet Union military secrets and technologies from the West, from NATO and from America, but it had America roped in, and America supplied it with massive military and financial aid under the false pretext that Israel was an ally. So this has been going on for a very, very long time. And Chabad was always serving as an intermediary and intelligence agency for Israel that was highly connected in the American government. JFK was involved with Chabad long before RFK Jr. was involved with Chabad, and Vladimir Putin was involved with Chabad from his early childhood through to his connections to Roman Abramovich and the chief rabbi of Russia, who he made Chief Rabbi Berel Lazar, who is a very top Chabadnik. So that is the connection that has always been there, but there was the pretense that, and the system was created of mutually assured destruction, so that the West, especially the Atlanticist of the United Kingdom and America, the Leviathan, could be pitted against the behemoth of the East, of the Soviet Union and the Red Chinese, so that we could mutually destroy one another. And they created the system of nuclear weapons with mutually assured destruction. And part of that system was that America would provide a massive nuclear umbrella to safeguard the NATO nations of Western Europe. And we formed a massive Western alliance in that regard. And it was applied as the coalition of the willing, effectively, in the war in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And it was also always a coalition of the willing to defend Israel. Israel has been committing massive human rights violations. And I was talking about this decades ago, that they realized that people in the West believed in human rights, but that the Russians and the Chinese had far less regard for human rights, and that they would ultimately shift their alliance from the West to Russia and China as they started to perpetrate atrocities and genocide against the Palestinians and started to expand into greater Israel. So they've been working on this for decades, and they now have done something that they had always planned to do and that they did with Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was the Messiah, son of Joseph. And the role of the Messiah, son of Joseph, is often to play the role of the rebel Jewish king who is rebelling not against the Jews, but is rebelling against the Roman West. And that's what Jesus was accused of. And the figurehead of the Messiah, son of Joseph, infiltrates the West in order to lead it and subvert it. And we now have Donald Trump, who has been openly proclaimed by the Jewish people to be the Messiah, son of Joseph, to be the new Cyrus of Isaiah chapter 45, verse 1. So his role is to lead the West, but to subvert it and destroy it and split it apart. So, as I've been saying for 10 years, Trump's role is to subvert NATO. He is taking over the West in order to drive a wedge into the West between America and the rest of the Western alliance. And he has shifted his alliance to Russia and to the Sunni Muslims in the Middle East. So George Bush pursued the global war on terror, which, and most people don't know this, was set up by Vladimir Putin in 1999. Chabadnik Putin instigated a series of apartment bombings in and around Moscow that were conducted by the successor organization to the KGB, the FSB. And Putin had been director of the FSB and had been a career KGB man in East Germany and also a major in the Stasi, secret police organization of East Germany. And there were several reporters who discovered, and there were investigations that discovered, and they were caught. FSB agents were planting more bombs to blame on the Chechens. But Putin assassinated those reporters and covered it up and used his global influencers to discredit the true facts that he had engaged in this false flag terrorism. And this model precipitated 9/11. It was the exact same model of false flag terrorism. And so he said, after he himself conducted this terrorism, that there needs to be a global war on terrorism. And he announced that in Russia in 1999. And then when 9/11 happened, and George Bush set up the coalition of the willing for the second Gulf War, the Iraq War, Putin applauded it and encouraged it and did what he could to support it. So this became that beginning of that American-Russian alliance, which Trump is now formulating formally. But back then, it was not opposed to NATO, and it was not opposed to America's European, Canadian, Australian, and other allies the way that Trump is. So now they have taken it a step further. And what they are doing is uniting what Mao Zedong called the global north. Not the global north, the superpowers is what he called them, of the US and Russia. And they are creating a new dynamic whereby America can copy what Russia did in Ukraine and what Israel is doing in Gaza and the West Bank, and that is to start to annex their neighbors. And the agreement is that they will sponsor one another, that Trump will sponsor the Russian annexation of Crimea and ultimately all of Ukraine, and then move into the Baltics, move into Moldova, Romania, etc. And he will lift that mutually assured destruction umbrella of nuclear counterattacks or preemptive first strikes from Western Europe. So Western Europe becomes tremendously vulnerable to nuclear attack from Russia. UK has a nuclear arsenal which is dwarfed in comparison to the Russian nuclear arsenal, and France is even smaller. These are obsolete weapons. These are weapons on rocket systems which are obsolete and which are vastly outclassed by the new hypersonic missiles of the Russians. So what is being set up is a situation where they have now driven a wedge in the Western alliance and separated it due to the fact that Trump, Messiah, son of Joseph, is this treacherous figure as Jesus Christ was, whose goal is to lead the West, but to mislead it and subvert it and bring it down. And he is now pitting it against itself, just as happened, say, in the Reformation, where Catholics and Lutherans and Anglicans and Protestants were pitted against one another. And those were very bloody wars that took 8 million lives, the wars of the Reformation. So we're being set up to double team and tag team continental Europe, with both America and Russia attacking and destroying Europe. And one of the reasons he wants to gain Greenland is to have a foothold from which to wage war against the Europeans and to dominate the nuclear window through the Arctic between America and Russia. And they will have complete control over that area in which ballistic nuclear weapons are launched. And they also have control over the Antarctic, especially the Russians do, and the Chinese as well. So we're being set up to be completely annihilated. And they want to divide and conquer. They want to fillet the Leviathan and destroy continental Europe, kill off continental Europeans. And then at the same time, they are subverting the United States and weakening the United States, and they are going to have elements of Eurasianists, people from India and people from China primarily, and also from Africa and all around the world, move into America and come to dominate America. And then they will destroy the European, Edomite, Amalekite, Romans of European-based peoples in America itself. So they are setting this up in stages as a process with this treacherous Messiah, son of Joseph, first driving a wedge between us and separating us, and becoming, Trump is warning in the sale of the F-47 new generation fighter jet, he said that he would tone down those planes by at least 10%, that he would give to our supposed allies because they may not be allies for very long. They are actually setting this up so that America, together with Russia, will attack continental Europe. And so that the behemoth of the Eurasianists and of Israel will triumph over the Leviathan of the Atlanticists.
You've been talking about the behemoth and the Leviathan, a mutual destructive war. It just seems like that bit is obviously still going to happen, but the kind of the players have been moved around. Something I wanted to ask you,
But it's very,
Zelensky had,
if I may,
yeah, of course.
it's very important to understand that all of these forces are ultimately under the same control. So the Leviathan was always meant to be subverted the way that Christianity subverted Rome, take away their supernatural protection of their pagan gods, take over their whole society, rule all the empires that they constructed from behind the curtain. And that's exactly what Trump is doing. It was never meant for Trump to make the Leviathan united and strong. It was always meant for Trump to subvert the Leviathan and divide it up and pit it against itself so that brother kills brother. This all relates to the legend of Cain. Cain killed his brother. So it is, in their minds, it is natural for Trump to inspire Europeans to kill one another because they have the soul of Cain. They are brother killers. So it is absolutely true that they have realigned the alliances, but this was always, it's still a function of the same fundamental metaphysical principles is what I'm trying to explain. And the figurehead of the Messiah, son of Joseph, is the rebel king of the Jews. He is not really the king of the West. He just impostures as king of the West in order to gain control of it as a Trojan horse and as a fifth column of the same powers in order to bring it down, in order to subvert it. He is like Esther. He is a subversive figure that has wormed his way to the very top, not so that he can bring us to glory. He is not going to gloriously help destroy Europe. He's going to continuously erode and destroy America in the process of destroying Europe, so that the Leviathan is skewered and hooked and killed off, just as the primary purpose of the Middle Eastern wars that the Bushes and the Clintons conducted was to bring down the West. The primary target of those wars was not the Islamic countries of the Middle East, it was America itself. They wanted to weaken us, bring us into debt, and they wanted to pit the whole world against us through our atrocities committed against these innocent peoples. So we are also being scapegoated for what's going on in Gaza, and we share a huge amount of blame for what is going on in Gaza, as does Great Britain, which is most unfortunate, and it is trying to pit the whole world against the Atlanticist power. And now they are dividing the Atlanticist power against itself, so that we face not only the enmity of the entire world, we are fighting one another as brothers, as Cain slew Abel.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see it all falling apart and crumbling over time. There's something that's happened in the last couple of days that I want to get your take on, and it relates to this. Alex Jones is coming out and he's losing his mind, but he's not really. I think he's acting. That Trump has said if they joined the Commonwealth, it wouldn't be such a bad thing. What is that about in terms of what we're talking here?
I'm sorry, it seems like a word dropped out in what you said just before. Commonwealth. Which Commonwealth?
The UK Commonwealth. He says they're going to join. Trump said it wouldn't be such a bad thing if they joined the UK Commonwealth. And Jones is, I think, playing the role of being annoyed about it, pretend enemies. What does that really have to do with that, with what's happening now? The kind of, is it just them? They want to pretend that they're not getting on, or is there something bigger here going on?
So you're saying that there's a concept attributed to Trump that he is
Yep.
now saying that America ought to once again become a part of the Commonwealth of the United Kingdom.
That's what it's been reported this morning. I'll just make sure I got that right, but this is pretty much exactly what I saw this morning. So Alex Jones was losing his mind about it, but he wasn't really. I think he was actually just playing the role of losing his mind about it. Um,
That would
so
be
it says if you,
the
yep. So
firming
it
up
says
of the Atlanticist powers.
So the 15 hours ago, if the United States, from Alex Jones' X account, if the United States joining the UK Commonwealth is no big deal, which is what Trump's apparently said, then why did it not happen before? The United Kingdom is run by globalists and who hate the very existence of Americans. The answer to 1984 is 1776. So yes, I did get that right, and I just wondered what that kind of play is about.
Well, what Alex Jones is doing is forwarding this wedge being driven between the alliance of America and the United Kingdom, which is tremendously important for both nations. We have strong historic ties, even though we broke from one another and warred against one another in the beginning. Starting primarily with World War I, we have been very supportive of one another, and the whole concept of America grew out of Anglo-Saxons who had emigrated from the United Kingdom, and the strong legacy of Parliament and freedom of speech and freedom of religion came directly from the United Kingdom. We have strong historical ties, and the only thing that separates us is a common language. But in terms of this proposition that England is going to take America back, I recall there were Senate hearings or congressional hearings in the United States, I think around the 1920s, in which a supposed letter had been found that was saying exactly that something was about to happen. I think Colonel House, Edward Mandell House may have been involved in it. But if people want to look that up, I'll look it up after the interview. But I'm certain that sometime around that period of World War I to the 1920s, there was definitely a letter that was passed around, I think, in the Congress that was saying exactly that the ultimate goal was to restore America to the British Commonwealth, and that had always been the plan all along. In terms of this whole schematic of the Leviathan versus Behemoth, it would definitely fulfill that idea that the sea powers, England has always been a strong naval power, especially since it defeated the Spanish Armada. This idea that the Leviathan powers would be isolated from Europe and become one force would definitely play along with it. But again, they can play along with it treacherously both ways by separating it, pitting it against itself, etc. But Keir Starmer was very staunch in his support of the United States and the relationship between America and the United States. So I would wait to see until more facts come out and assess it from that point. But it's very interesting in terms of that letter. That letter came immediately to mind, and I'll have to look that up.
It's all very interesting. There seems to be a lot of moving and shaking around at the moment. Could this have anything to do with a bit more occult?
Well, this also confuses all of our allies. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but
no.
All of this flip-flopping, just as Trump is doing with the tariffs. One week he's saying we're going to tariff Mexico 50%, Canada 50%. The next week it's 25%. The next week we're in negotiations to stop it. All of this is generating chaos by design and confusing people as to who their allies are. So it's gaslighting everyone and making it impossible for anyone to plan. The Germans, when they hear this, don't know if they can count on the UK or if they can count on America or if they should join with China, which is another aspect of all this. They are trying to get Americans to align with Russia in the name of fighting China, and they are trying to get Europeans to align with China in the name of fighting Russia and potentially the Americans. I just saw a couple articles today talking about that. And there's a book, New Lies for Old and Perestroika Deception by Anatoly Golitsyn, where he said that the Russians and the Chinese were both part of international communism, but they would pretend to fight one another in order to garner alliances where they could control both sides and subvert both sides. And that's exactly what they're doing by aligning America with Russia and potentially Western Europe with China. And then if Western Europe becomes aligned with China, that makes a very good pretext for America to wage war against Western Europe, to take Greenland as a base for launching attacks against continental Europe, to utilize Greenland and Canada as a Siberian American Siberia in order to establish gulags for Western European peoples who will be vilified as Nazis, as the Ukrainians are. And part of the communist denazification, anti-fascist movement will be to ship Western Europeans to exterminate them in the American Siberia of Greenland and Canada. And the same will happen to Americans of European descent. And I can understand if someone finds this outrageous or preposterous, but I was saying this before Trump started to set up penal colonies in foreign countries. And he is establishing El Salvador as a penal colony, and he has been sending prisoners there. And I think they want to turn Greenland and the Arctic regions of Canada into an American Siberia and a penal colony. They are setting up for Americans to wage war on Western Europeans. This was inconceivable 6 months ago, absolutely inconceivable. And now they have people cheerleading for it. And that's one of the things that alarms me most, is the way that they are able to shift narratives and to manipulate people into supporting the things that they opposed only a matter of a few months ago, or a matter of a few weeks, or even days ago. The absolute control they have over the mindset of people through this hero worship. And I think that's why they picked Trump, is they knew that he had this gift, this Messiah, son of Joseph gift of promising people that which are complete lies, the way that Jesus promised a perfect afterlife in heaven, and all it required to join the club was faith and the abandonment of your own protective ancestral gods. And Trump is a great salesman who pitches all of these self-destructive ideas as if they're beneficial for people, and people swallow it hook, line, and sinker. And they swallow it because they're cheerleading for their sports team. It's like the Super Bowl, and they have their side, and then the left, supposed left, has its side, even though Trump is a communist and as far left as you can get. And all they want to do is move the football to one goalpost or the other. They don't really understand that if Trump succeeds, they fail. If Trump succeeds, they get exterminated. If Trump succeeds, all of our historical alliances are destroyed, and we are aligned with countries whose stated aim is to annihilate us. The communists were very, very strong about destroying the United Kingdom and about destroying the Americans. And they were heavily involved in Ireland to pit England and Ireland against one another, well, more to take advantage of the conflict which had historically existed. Maybe we can do a Kabbalah on that one. That's a good subject, is the conflict between Ireland and the UK. But now they are creating a conflict between America and UK and the continent and America. They are creating absolute chaos, and it's completely unnecessary. And it's all being staged, and people are buying into it because we have absolutely no competent leadership, which is standing before the public and openly explaining what's happening and why it's happening.
I think that's it, though, Christopher, is that people do not understand the context of any of this stuff in terms of the narrative and the agenda of where it's leading, in terms of the Kabbalah, but in terms of Chabad Lubavitch. Most people have never even heard of Chabad Lubavitch. What do you think happened with Zelensky? Zelensky obviously was surrounded by the Chabad guys. The US and the UK was supporting him, and then suddenly it's all reversed. Was he used by these guys? Did he tell these guys to do one, and I'm not going to be part of it? Because was it Kolomoisky, is it the guy that funded him?
Kolomoisky, yeah.
Kolomoisky was involved with two guys that were openly, well, not openly, they were funding a couple of Chabad charities, I suppose you could call them, that push Nielsen's ideologies. So there was a connection there with Chabad through Kolomoisky to Zelensky. But do you think this is a silly man who's just going to fall for this, and we'll use him while we can?
And as you know, there's much more to that Kolomoisky connection. Kolomoisky controlled the television station that promoted that sitcom where Zelensky played the role of the president. And then Kolomoisky set up the political party and then funded and anointed, crowned as kingmaker Zelensky in his run, where he beat Poroshenko and that woman Tomashenko, or whatever his name was, and dominated the politics and won with like a 73% majority. So there was very strong ties with that, and Kolomoisky is tied to Chabad, and Kolomoisky keeps flip-flopping on whether he sides with Ukraine or with Russia in this. And then Zelensky, now all this started in 2014 under Yanukovych. And the Russians set up that coup in Maidan Square, and Yanukovych walked away without a fight. It was obviously all staged and scripted by the Russians so that they would have a pretext to move on Crimea and take it, and to establish an insurgency in the Donbass. And then when Yanukovych left and was supposedly ousted in a coup, Poroshenko took over, and then Zelensky took over from him, but as the puppet of Kolomoisky. Now, I don't believe that Zelensky is Chabad, but as you pointed out, there is that connection of Kolomoisky funding these Chabad centers. And Kolomoisky had business dealings with Roman Abramovich, who is the big Russian oligarch involved with Chabad and with Beryl Lazar and with Putin. You'll often see Roman Abramovich representing, even though he's not a government official, representing Russia in negotiations and attending conferences on behalf of Russia. And Putin said that Kolomoisky had cheated Roman Abramovich out of billions of dollars, and that Abramovich's excuse was simply that he wasn't aware that such things could happen. It could be that these were dirty dealings and that they were always in it together. This was a way of laundering money out of Russia. This was a way of avoiding sanctions, whatever. But Kolomoisky also flip-flops, and at times he's staunchly opposed to Russia, and at times he's supportive of a Russian victory and annexation of parts of Ukraine. So this is obviously all dirty double dealing. Now, Zelensky ultimately started to charge the Ukrainian oligarchs with corruption. And this was done not at the instigation so much of the Ukrainians, but at the instigation of the United States. The United States has sanctions in place, and the United States and the EU has always been opposed to corruption in any nation that wants to join the EU or any nation that wants to be an ally of the United States. So I think that the falling out between Zelensky and Kolomoisky is also a form of deception and was precipitated and insisted upon by the United States. So this is a dirty deal that's leading the Ukrainian people and the Russian people into a mutual slaughter. Again, it's the model of brother killing off brother, and I have numerous Old Testament passages related to the Egyptians and others talking about how they shall all be subverted, and Esau subverted by pitting brother against brother. But Zelensky has also somehow managed to keep Ukraine in the fight, and the West has betrayed Ukraine from the very beginning. NATO, Biden, America, and all of our European allies, almost all, not all of them, but especially the Western continental and United Kingdom, said that they do not want Ukraine to win. And it was completely absurd that they should be supplying weaponry to Ukraine, but then hamstringing the use of that weaponry, supplying substandard weaponry, supplying it late and not on the schedules that were set, so the Ukrainians could not plan militarily to be effective. So they created kind of a stalemate, continuing conflict between Ukraine and Russia by design. And whenever Ukraine would make advances, they would withdraw support to ensure that Ukraine could not defeat Russia. They did similar things with the sanctions. In 2014, they should have immediately taken Russia out of the SWIFT banking system before Russia could build up its war chest, its treasury for the war that it subsequently did. They always delayed their sanctions. They always put in deliberately ineffective sanctions. They often fail to enforce even those minor sanctions that they put in. So the West was entirely complicit in keeping this conflict going and ensuring that Russia would not lose, and ensuring that massive numbers of Ukrainian and Russian forces would be destroyed. And some may try to justify that by saying that they were allowing the Ukrainians to be utilized so that they could use up the Russian munitions and weaken Russia in that way. But it predictably has had the opposite effect. All of this stalling and delaying has enabled Russia to build up its munitions manufacturing and develop its more and more state-of-the-art next-generation weapon systems, especially missile systems. So I think this was engineered from the beginning to lead to this continual massive destruction of the Ukrainian people and the slaughter of young Russian males as well. And also to set it up so that Putin could start training people in Africa, throughout Asia, to bring them into Europe to be utilized in this slaughter of Europeans, which is coming, and to build up this hatred in what Mao Zedong called the global South towards Europeans. And as Europeans become more and more concerned about this massive influx of immigrants, they should be aware that in those other regions of the world, they are being portrayed as if they are racists and fascists and Nazis. And Putin and the communists are spreading propaganda all around the world about colonization and vilifying all of the European powers for that colonial past and calling them racist and promoting the idea that the only salvation for the global South is the complete extermination of European peoples, that European peoples owe this debt of their lives for all of the destruction that they have historically wrought upon Africa, upon India. India is a good example. India has made major population transfers to the United Kingdom. And I've spoken to many Indian Hindus who say that ultimately their goal is to completely destroy the United Kingdom and to take over the United Kingdom and to take over America. And they don't care if it brings them down as well, together with the UK, those living there, because this is retribution and payback for all the things that England had done to India. So that all around the world, they are mobilizing and generating forces to be used to kill off the Europeans. And this has been alarming me for 30 years very strongly, because if you read the Old Testament, there are countless passages prophesying the complete destruction of Edom and the complete destruction of the Edomites, and Europeans are defined now as the Edomites. That is the plan. That's the plan that they are pursuing. And you can see how their objectives are being met both openly and very covertly and stealthily in destroying us and in pitting us against one another.
So people that don't understand, I just want to get your. I want to come to the Edomites and the West as Rome in a minute, because that makes sense of everything you've just said and it puts into the context of this messianic Habad Sabbatean agenda for a world to come, or Olam Ha-Ba. There's something I did want to ask you though. Giorgia Meloni, obviously the Prime Minister of Italy, she came out and said that we're holding up Roman values and Christian values. Now that seemed to go against like what the others were saying. Is she just stepped out of line, or is there a reason for her to come out and saying that? Obviously, we have Russia, we have Putin for ages saying the West is satanic and we're all a bunch of Satanists. So he's setting that up, but she's come out and said something almost like anti that recently, and I just found that kind of interesting. Anyway,
but it's actually from the perspective of the Kabbalists, it's not anti that. It's saying that openly. It's publicly expressing the fact that they are Satanists, because in the eyes of Kabbalah, Jesus Christ is Satan. Jesus hanging on the cross represents the serpent hanging on the tree of knowledge and good and evil. It also represents the brazen serpent that Moses raised hanging on the cross, which represents the Asherah grove, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So when Meloni says that, as an Italian representing Rome, representing the Roman Empire, she is identifying Rome as being Edom, as being the satanic force, as being what the Kabbalists refer to as the Sitra Achra, the other side, the evil, unholy, wicked side. So what she is doing is cursing the West and making the West that artificial satanic empire in order to serve that satanic role. So just as the Christian nationalists in America embrace that same role, what they are doing metaphysically in the eyes of the Kabbalists is saying, yes, this is who we are. We are the soul of Cain that was inherited through Eve when Eve fornicated with the serpent and produced the child Cain. We bear that soul. We are Edom. We are the followers of Messiah, son of Joseph. We are the followers of Jesus. Jesus is Satan. That is who we are. In terms of Putin, Putin's brain is Alexander Dugin. Alexander Dugin is a Kabbalist, and he identifies Russia with the behemoth, the land powers, and with this messianic quest. And though he associates the Russian Orthodox Church with that, there has, for many centuries, as I said, their goal is always to split the Leviathan and pit it against one another. From the 1700s onward, Peter the Great was called the Antichrist and was associated with Gog and Magog. And there were many writings from the 14th century on, especially in England, identifying Russia and the Ottoman Empire when it came to power as the Antichrist and being this these forces of Gog and Magog. And that goes all the way through to the Scofield Bible. In the reference notes in the Scofield Reference Bible, it says that Russia is Gog and Magog and that the Tsar is the Antichrist. So that this conflict, again, is being played on both sides. The Muslims are being told by the Kabbalists that it is the West that is evil and satanic and has to be destroyed. But at the same time, there are Kabbalists in the West telling the West that Islam is the Antichrist and needs to be destroyed and is satanic. It is naive to think that there is a genuine alliance between the Kabbalists and the West to ultimately have the West be victorious. And it is naive for people to think that there is a genuine alliance between the Russians or the Muslims or the behemoth powers and the Kabbalists to ultimately have them be victorious and live in peace and glory and survive as the righteous together with the Kabbalists. On the contrary, they are subverted. It is not an alliance, it is a subversion. And the West has been completely subverted, as has the East. And in the East, those subversive agents pit the East against the West. And in the West, those subversive agents pit the West against the East. And they go even further than that, and they pit the West against itself, driving wedges in our alliances and causing all kinds of chaos so that they can then have a new order arise.
That makes total sense. It kind of lines up with the whole Black Panther era of separating the US as well, and that kind of division within itself as well. The whole just breaking it down for him. This is Sabbateanism, isn't it? How important are Chabad to this? Are they just a front shop in terms of being? I mean, I call them the Men in Black because literally that's exactly what they are. Are they just a one faction of this, or are they kind of a leading faction of this? I know what they believe. I read in all your books, obviously. Fantastic work about Lurianic Kabbalah, which I'm still learning as we're going. But how fundamental are Chabad in this, or is that a surface level thing that we're seeing?
For a very long time, it was not surface level, and it was kept under wraps. And they were heavily involved in both of the world wars. They have been heavily involved in the politics of the United States and the relationship between the United States and Israel. And where they are most tremendously powerful has always been in Russia and Ukraine. And I think they are very significant force. But they are also, there's a little bit of trickery going on within them. There are divisions within them. And there is this rabbinical history of Sephardic Jews being bred into the rabbinical lines of the Ashkenazi Jews. And the Ashkenazi Jews have often been set up to endure the punishments to be meted out against the Jewish people and to be subverted by these Sephardic Jews. And there is ultimately, I think, the Sephardim want to stand on top after persecuting the Ashkenazim, but the Ashkenazim are the ones who are the most politically powerful in Russia, in Ukraine, in the United States, and in Israel. So there is a very hidden layer going back from multiple generations through the rabbinical lines where the Sephardim have infiltrated the Ashkenazim in this way, and Chabad is one of the big aspects of that. The Shabbatayans were principally Sephardic Jews, the Dernmei that grew out of the Shabbatayan movement in the Ottoman Empire, principally in the Greek city of Salonika, through a figure named called Osman Baba, Baruchia Russo. And after the death of Shabbatai Tzvi, they believed that the Gilgulim, the reincarnations of Shabbatai Tzvi, would form a descendant list of kings who would become rulers. And then from Baruchia Russo, eventually it wound up with Jacob Frank, who was very involved in Poland, who lived in Salonika and became a member of this Dernmei cult, and then asserted that he had inherited this Messiah, son of David's soul, from Shabbatai Tzvi. And this Frankist movement was in the same region and heavily involved with the rising Hasidic movement that was started by a con man and hustler named Baal Shem Tov. And some scholars, Gershom Shalom and others, have said that this Hasidic movement is really a Shabbatayan movement that gained its influence through the philosophy of Spinoza and through Jacob Frank. And then we had Snort Salman, who was another hustler and con man, who set up this Chabadnik dynasty, and he foretold that there would be 7 Rebbes. The Rebbe is the spiritual leader of these Hasidic sects, and he serves as the Logos, the intermediary between that sect and God, in the same way that Jesus Christ was the Logos, the atom of the light. But the Logos figure that Philo Judaeus in his Middle Platonic philosophy said served as an intermediary between God and man across the astral plane and projected through the demonic forces directly to God, and had prophetic powers and was almost a form of a demigod. And Jesus was presented as a demigod, as being the child of the Father is God, and the mother was a Jewish woman. And so these Rebbes take on this messianic role. And Snort Salman said that there would be 7 of these, and then the true Messiah would appear. And that is why Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson was the 7th Rebbe. And after he died, there was no 8th, and that is because it is now time to anoint publicly and for the world the messianic leader of the Jewish people. So Chabadniks themselves are very confused. Will this person be a Chabadnik? Will it be the reincarnation of Rebbe Schneerson, who is the reincarnation of Shabbatai Tzvi? Or will it be someone else? Or are the Chabadniks themselves being played by a very higher and very hidden force of Sephardic Jewry? And this gets very, very theological and into very deep things that I've analyzed that have to do with Ezekiel and these 2 sticks that unite to become one stick that I have identified as the Ashkenazim and as the Sephardics. And so I think it is fluid. I think Chabad has tremendous political power through Donald Trump through Benjamin Netanyahu and Likud in Israel, and through Vladimir Putin. But I think there are forces much above Chabad. And I think the appearance of the ultimate Messiah, son of David, will not be a Chabadnik and will not be a Hasidic or an Ashkenazi Jew, but will instead be a Sephardic Jew.
It's really interesting. Something that I wanted to bring up with you. I knew there's a faction within them that some believe that the Tradition's coming back, some don't, and that was to do with the digging underneath the HQ. I've been told, but then again, I was told that by someone who wrote a book about the Kabbalah, so who knows? This is really interesting. I really wanted to get your take on this. Chabad US sues Russia in an Israeli court to get back books. What are these books? Is Putin holding on to these things as some sort of ransom, some sort of, something to hang over the Chabad lot, or is this just again another bit of theatre that I don't understand?
I'm not familiar with the facts of that. I know that Putin helped to set up a museum in which I think there were papers from Rebbe Schneerson's predecessor, the previous Rebbe Schneerson. And I think that the Russians have those. And there were issues between that sixth Rebbe and the Soviets. So I suspect, as happened with the Holocaust, when things were confiscated by the Nazis, Jewish people around the world have filed lawsuits to try to reclaim all of those papers. And within Chabad, there are probably divisions as to how much power the Russians have versus how much power the Americans have. And without knowing the specifics of it, I suspect that that is what is going on, is simply who will gain ownership of this documentation, and that it is more on the level of a dispute as to who should properly maintain all of this information and where they are going to form a headquarters. And there are many things in terms of Judaism and as to whether or not Jews are permitted to live in Israel before the Messiah arrives en masse, and whether or not someone who travels to Israel is permitted to then leave it, or if they are bound to stay there and spend the rest of their lives. And there are, in Judaism, there are different points of view and different historical perspective. It's like in court where you have conflicting precedents and they have to work out and negotiate and arrange some kind of settlement that the rabbinical authorities can agree on as to what is the proper understanding of halakha, of Jewish law, and how it ought to be applied to the facts of the given case. And it sounds like something similar to that is going on with the archival records, and I suspect it's related to the records of the sixth Rebbe. But again, I'm not familiar with these facts.
Then I just brought it up because it seems like again, there's factions within there, as you say, that are fighting each other, and I think it's good for almost the listener to hear, in the sense that they're not as well organised or cohesive as we think. We've got 5 minutes left.
But
I
those
suppose
factions are potentially extremely dangerous
Okay.
for the various parties, because if the Israeli faction is higher than the Russian and the American factions, then they see no problem with having Russia and America launch nuclear weapons at one another and completely annihilating one another, just as the Zionists were comfortable with harming people in Europe because they wanted to establish the Zionist colony in Palestine. So it is tremendously significant. And America, if Chabad wants to preserve America, gains benefits from that. But if the Russian Chabad faction wants to see America obliterated as part of the destruction of the Edomites, that has tremendous and terrible implications for America. So the lesson to be drawn from all this is we've got to get Chabad out of power in all of these places, because their ultimate goal is to utilize these messianic prophecies as their active plans and to ensure that they are fulfilled through artificial means. And they now have this troika of Netanyahu, Putin, and Trump working together. So even within 770, those headquarters that Chabad has, there was an upper level and a basement faction. The younger people, I think, were the ones in the basement with the tunnels, who were full-on believers that Schneerson is the Messiah. Some of them believe he's even still alive, or that he will. Others believe he will be reincarnated, and that his Gilgul will become the Messiah, son of David, over Israel. So yes, there are divisions, there are differences of opinion, there are politically expedient things that have to be done, just as Kolomoisky was thrown under the bus to be politically expedient so that Ukraine could continue its alliance with the U.S. Now that Trump has flipped, we'll see what happens next. Trump and Putin have been strongly trying to get Zelensky out of power. And if Zelensky is taken out of power, Kolomoisky may rise again. So everything is in flux. They do not have absolute power. They do not have the ability to forecast the future. They do have the ability to influence it. And they do have to maintain flexibility. If one of the things that they attempt doesn't work out, they often have many, many contingency scenarios and plans in which to get the ball over the goal line ultimately in the end. So there will be flip-flopping, and everything is not predictable on our side either. Things are in flux, and we ought to continue to exercise our influence as much as possible.
I think that's a really good message to get across, is that things are in flux and they are influential, and this isn't like game over. I mean, it seems like that sometimes, and these guys are fighting amongst themselves, but it seems to be kind of their thing is to bring down the West and Rome as the Edomites, and that's the big thing that I think we need to be over here anyway. And where you are, really wary of the moment, and as you said, this trio of Netanyahu, Putin, and Putin and Trump are these figureheads of these guys. We've got 3 minutes. Where can people find your work? Because I want to get this up on X. So where can people find your work? And we'll do another one of these. It's been another masterclass.
I am at cjbbooks.com. My initials, CJB, then books.com, with no spaces, hyphens, or dashes. My social media accounts are all also named CJB Books. You can find me on Twitter at CJB Books. You can find me on YouTube, Odyssey, BitChute, and Rumble at CJB Books. And my most active social media interactions take place on X.
And same here. So you can head over to Substack and see me trying to understand all this stuff in Some May Conspire, and my video works mostly on iconic.com. Thank you so much, Christopher. Another masterclass. We'll be back soon with another one. And please go and do your own research as well. Look into this stuff.
Thank you so much, Richard. It was a pleasure.